Well, in this lecture, I want to talk about one of the more complex features of graphical user interfaces in App Designer, which is a data table. And I've got my teaching assistant, Sumi, who's going to be helping me out today. She'll just sit on my back and correct me if I make any mistakes. So first, let me show you a really simple example, just to kind of motivate what we're trying to do. Let's say we wanted to make something like a very limited spreadsheet program where we can enter numbers in some of the cells, and it will add the total of each row, and then at the very end, give us a grand total in the lower right. Okay. All right, so you can see we added each row of numbers that I entered, and then summed the subtotals to get the overall total. All right, so the question with a table is, how do you set it up with how many rows and columns the table should have, and how do you get data into and out of the table? So let's open up App Designer and take a look at this app. So you can see when you drag and drop a table onto your palette, it doesn't show much about it. It's just kind of an empty square. And you actually want to control the layout of the table inside your program. So let's go to the code view. And you'll see that in the startup function, that's where I'm defining the layout of the table. You see here, I'm just initializing it so that it's a 5x4 table of zeros. And notice it's a cell array. Okay, so that's a key thing with the table. The data inside a table is stored in the form of a cell array, or specified in the form of a cell array. So you see I said app.UI table, and UI table is just the handle for this graphical object, .data. And just give it a 5x4 cell array of all zeros. So that's how I initialized the table. But then, as you saw when I ran the app, the first row and first column that have the row and column titles are also part of the table. So I want to set those to have the appropriate strings. So after initializing to all zeros, then I'm setting the row numbers and column numbers. The row headings and column headings. And you can just take a look at that couple of lines of code and try to understand what we're doing here. Okay. But this is the nice thing about cell arrays, or the reason cell arrays are used here. I can have some of the table entries be numbers, while others are strings or character arrays. All right, so that's initializing the table. So I run it, this startup function is executed, and that's what it looks like. Now, when do I actually update the row and column totals? Well, that's a matter of how you design it. What I chose to do here is every time I change a number, so just as it would be in, say, an Excel spreadsheet, it updates the totals. Okay. Which means I need a callback that will get executed whenever I change one of the cells in this table. And you can see that's called UI table cell edit. And so if you add a callback, choose the UI table, and then whatever out of the list that it gives you, select UI table cell edit. This callback will get executed whenever you change the contents of any cell in the table. So what am I doing? Well, you look at that code, it's pretty straightforward, just calculating the sums of each row and then the overall total, and then putting them in a cell array. Okay, so you see what I did here. First I read the current data from the table. And I just put it in a cell array called M. Then I change those elements of M that have the totals in them. And then when I'm all done, I write that back to the data table. All right, so that's pretty much the basics of getting information into and out of a data table in a GUI. Now, there are some other fine points here, most of which I'm not going to cover now because they're more advanced that we don't really need to talk about right now. But one that you probably do want to look at is over here in the the component browser. There's a property called column editable. And in this app, you only want columns 2 and 3 to be editable. Well, actually, now that I look at it, I guess I made it so that I can also edit the row titles. Okay. Okay, so I can edit the individual row and column titles if I want. But what I cannot edit is the totals. It won't let me do that because I programmed it. I set those properties here so that only the first 3 columns are editable. The one that has the row totals, that is not editable. Okay. And then again, there are more complex things you can do, like you can make each column sortable, you can make the columns rearrangeable, but I'm not going to talk about that here today.